Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brad Kuntz. I am with the Open Innovation Center at Hitachi Solutions. Welcome and thanks for joining us for a repeat of a successful presentation that we did at the recent UG conference in Phoenix called 10 Simple Tricks, Tools, and Techniques to Drive CRM Success. So we're joined with a great panel today, folks from Hitachi Solutions. Leah Bowling is our industry director. Earl Oxner is in charge of our organizational change management organization, and then John Walsh is our product manager, who's going to talk about a lot of the tools that are in the portfolio that we have here. So what we're going to cover today, we have designed this to kind of be a fast-paced look at some simple tricks, tools, and techniques to drive success of your implementation. So we're going to kick it off first talking about having a plan. Kind of makes sense. And we'll move there. And then after that, we're going to get into a little bit of the area around adoption. I know user adoption is so very important to the success of a Dynamics 365 implementation. And so we're going to spend a good bit of time talking about some of the tricks that we have around how to drive adoption. We're going to be talking about a really cool solution that we have, Hitachi Solutions has, that is a GIS, which is Geographical Information System solution, that allows our customers to market to their people smarter. We're also going to talk about a no-code complex business rule management, talk about how a lot of our customers are using Powerups to expand the reach of their Dynamics 365. A little bit of a mystery tip there called Help Me Help You. John's going to take us through adding military-grade encryption to your Dynamics 365 implementation, talking about how to easily manage your contracts, a new tool that we have in the marketplace. It's in the app source right now currently, called Activity Notes. That's been very popular. And then at the end, we'll talk about how do you prepare for that rapid release cycle and make sure that your Dynamics 365 implementation is truly future-proof from the release cycle that does come down from Microsoft. So without further ado, to get into our very first tip, we'll start with Earl Oxner. Earl, take it away.
Thank you. I'm Earl Oxner. I run our organizational change management group. Prior to starting that group, I've spent 14 years implementing CRM for Hitachi, and during that time of implementing CRM, I really began to focus more and more on what drives user adoption, and that's why we started our change management group. It's really focused around what drives user adoption and making sure that we take a proactive approach during the project for driving user adoption. So you've got the technical aspects of it, and a lot of these other tips that we're going to talk about today are around technical and functional things that you can do to drive adoption. What I'm going to talk about in this particular piece is a plan on how to get your people ready to adopt the change. And so in order to do that, you put together a plan, a proactive plan to drive it. And so there's a number, and so this is a user adoption plan. And what I'm going to talk about is kind of the things that go into that and what you need to be thinking about around that. So it doesn't take a lot of time to do, but by going through these and thinking about these different things, it can make a huge bit of difference. So the first step of it is getting a layout of the land, and that's the first step. The goal of that is basically to gather enough information about what's going on in the project so that you can build that adoption plan. And so in looking at that, you're really looking at, first of all, the history, kind of how you got there. So is this a redo of a project that maybe went poorly before? And so if so, why did it go poorly? And have there been stops and starts prior to that? Because those kinds of things can build distrust for whether or not you're going to successfully do this or not. And so, what's worked in the past in terms of how you've rolled things out, how you've trained, how you've communicated, and what things have not worked. And so understanding that kind of history is extremely important in order to drive a path forward. the other things that we look at, people, understanding, what does that organizational structure look like? Who are your influencers, the key people that people respect, that are subject matter experts that can help you? Who are the sponsors? Do they agree with the change? Are they all in agreement of it? All those kinds of things. How's it organized? All that will help you in terms of understanding how to go out and train and how to communicate and all those kinds of things. The strategy is all about who benefits from this, and what's the reason for doing this? What's that why as to why you're doing this? And does it benefit management? Does it benefit end users, or is there some semblance of both? And then change. So what's actually changing? And you might say, well, dummy, it's the software, of course. And true, so you've got software there, but you also can have process changes, you can have role changes that's there as well. There's a company we worked with that was implementing a end user portal, and they had poor adoption of that end user portal. And what they found as they dug into that was their CSRs were the ones really using that portal on behalf of the end users. And so they went through a process where, that really wasn't what they had intended. They wanted that end user portal for the end users to do things that are, change addresses and do things like that, self-service types of things. They really wanted their CSRs to focus more on doing things that would more value add for the end users and be more consultative. And so, yes, they did a new end user portal for their end users, but they also did a lot of training for their CSRs, so the CSRs will understand their role, understand their value, understand what they're supposed to do. So it's processes, roles, and systems. And so understanding the nature of that change makes a difference, because you could train differently, communicate differently based on what's changing. So the next piece is creating the why. And what that means is, why are we doing this in the first place? Understanding, does it benefit management? In other words, is it one of those, you've got kind of a carrot versus stick approach? So if it's really just benefiting management, that means management wants people to use it in order for them to have a better visibility into what's going on potentially. And so therefore, it benefits management, doesn't necessarily benefit end users. Management's going to need to drive people to use it in order for them to get the benefits of it. And so your approach is going to be more in terms of how you're going to get people to make sure they understand they have to use it. How are you going to coach management to where they're setting things up properly in terms of how they operate in order to drive people to use it? And as an example would be, like, let's say you have sales pipeline, and so the person who heads up sales might have a meeting with the salespeople, use CRM, for example, as the tool that people are using within the meeting, and using that to drive people, discussion on people's pipeline. And if it's not in CRM, if it's not in that pipeline that you're looking at, it doesn't exist. And the management might call out the salesperson if something's not in there as it should be. And that's a way to kind of drive it with a stick approach. That's one approach. The other is end user benefits. So if there are things that create productivity enhancements for the end users, it might be automatic nurturing programs. It could be automatic householding capabilities. It could be a number of different things where you're automating certain manual processes today, or making data available that wasn't available before, making it easier to get to than it was before. Things that make an end user say, gee, this is great for me, I want to do this. So it's understanding those kinds of things, and that's important to make sure that there are appropriate whys that's going to make it successful, because if there's not, then you can guarantee there's not going to be adoption. If management's not going to push it, yet it only benefits management, then most likely it's not going to get used. If there's not enough end user benefits, then odds are end users aren't going to want to use it. And so looking at that, looking at the roadmap of the functionality, matching it up to that, and making sure that it all makes sense, and honestly looking at it and saying, are people really going to use it based on the why that we have here? So that's the creating of the why. And that's really the fundamental thing that drives communications, training, all the things that happen later on in the plan. And what you want to get to ultimately when you create that why is an elevator pitch for why we're doing this, something that could be really quickly told to someone that says, oh gee, now I get it, I understand why we're doing this. So then that drives into the branding, and branding can be a way to give a visual representation for why you're doing this. So there was a project we had where people did little pigs that said, have you fed your CRM today? And it was a way of just kind of, you put it on people's desks and it gave people an idea of, yeah, this is why, I need to be doing this. And so branding can be a way to visually give people a representation of why we're doing this, what makes sense, and give people that visual cue that, oh, I need to continue to do this. And the naming of it can help with, if it was a previously unsuccessful implementation, it's a way to kind of say, hey, we're doing something new by renaming it. And so that can help kind of give you a clean slate. Also, it can help just give everybody an idea of why we're doing this by the name of it. Again, going back to that elevator pitch. So that's the branding of it. Then you get into sponsorship, and sponsorship is all about making sure you've got the right person leading the charge, that it's typically a business person that the end users are going to look up to, that they have some organizational, reporting to structure ultimately to the sponsor. So therefore there's influence that the sponsor has over everybody that's going to be potentially using it. They're decisive, they can make decisions, and they're also very engaged and visually in front of everyone. And so you want to make sure that sponsorship, who are the sponsors? Are they the right sponsors? If you have multiple sponsors like sales, marketing, support, IT, if they're all, a lot of times you'll see you have a number of sponsors that represent different areas. Are they all in agreement as to why we're doing this, and making sure that that's in place? Because if those things aren't in place, that's a risk. Like a lot of these, as we're going through this, as you're developing your plan, you can see things that may be problematic so that you can begin to address it, whether it's issues with the roadmap, where there may not be enough functionality to drive people to want to use it, or issues with sponsorship, whatever the case may be. This is an opportunity while you're building this plan up to say, here are the risks, so let's proactively manage those risks. So then just quickly to go through the remaining items, influencers, those are people that are, they're subject matter experts. The opinion matter, their opinion of things matters to people that work around them. They don't have to be necessarily managers. They can be really any level, but they're people that people look up to, and they can help twofold. They can help explain the why and support the process to end users. And they can also give feedback to the project team on the validity of the roadmap, what people are thinking, what people are going to like, what they're not going to like, what are they currently thinking, are there any issues or risks that the project team needs to know about. So influencers can be a really good group of people to make sure that you have in place, so you get a pulse of what's going on, and they can help support and train users ongoing. So then you have communications. Communications is a plan that basically says who's going to drive what messages at what times to what people, and it's a way to make sure that you've got the right messages going out to the right people at the right time, using the right communication method, whether it be email, newsletters, whatever the case may be. Training, obviously there are enormous different ways to train. So based on what you're doing, what's the best way to train? How do you train ongoing? So after you're live, how are you going to train it going forward? Those kind of things need to be spelled out. And then support. So support, a lot of people think about technical support when they think of support, but it's not just technical support, it's also senior management support. So senior management needs to continue to support it going forward. When we're talking about kind of the stick approach, well, that There needs to be that management showing that they support this. If you're using that stick approach, they need to make sure they keep pushing people to use it. If you're not using that stick approach, or just in terms of ongoing making enhancements, management needs to be on board. They need to continue to communicate the importance of it and continue to support it financially for enhancements. Business support, that gets to making sure that you've got the right influencers in place to support it going forward. So it's so that people know who they can turn to for business process support as well as technical support. Their regular communications going out to the end users on a regular basis, best practices, new functions and features, all those kinds of things, benefits, all those kind of things are communicated on a regular basis. Technical support, of course, being able to offer that help desk kind of support, and governance. What new features are going to go in when? How do people get new features in? How those get communicated and rolled in? All those kind of things need to be there. And in general, support needs to be the kind of thing across the board where people can get fast support when they need it. And so making sure that people get back timely, understanding that and reporting on that is a big deal. So all those things need to be part of the plan, and then that by having that plan, you can proactively drive user adoption throughout. And that's it.
Great, thanks, Earl. We're going to pass it over for our next tip and tool to Leah.
Hey guys, and let me close out my thing. Can y'all hear me okay?
Sure can.
Okay, perfect. All right, so Leah Bowling here. I head up our industry practice at Hitachi's, but my background is in pre-sales. And the reason I mention that is that the same sexy look and feel of CRM that gets users to want to buy the solution is the same sexy look and feel that gets users to want to use the system. So we've got a couple tools and tips here that are going to allow you to have a UI experience for your end users that's just going to be something that they're more interested in looking at visually, that makes it more user friendly for them as far as what they can do with it. One of the first things, and all of the tools I should level set, whenever we get the kind of product roadmap from the product team at Microsoft, we usually get it a bit early. We've got several MVPs on our team that kind of get it early, get a sneak peek. We always keep in mind that Microsoft is coming out with new features, and so we want to make sure that we're either enhancing those features or deciding not to develop those features because they're going to come out in a new release. So we really co-develop the features that we have, the visual enhancements that we have, alongside with the Microsoft tools, and the best way to describe it is that we take a Microsoft widget or feature in the system when it comes to UI, and we kind of inject it with steroids. And I think that the effective grid is going to be the same type of solution here. So this is one of the what we call better adoption through better UX widgets that we offer. It's called the effective grid. And if you have CRM, I think 2014 or later, or 2015 or later, you've got an effective grid functionality. And that allows you to have the out-of-the-box editable grids. They don't call them effective grids, but you can do things like inline bulk editing. You can do bulk edits. You can do single line edits. It kind of makes any CRM view a little more Excel-like without having to actually export to Excel. So we took that concept. It was a concept that Microsoft added into the system because it was widely adopted and everybody loved having an editable grid. And we kind of added some sizzle and added a couple extra, kind of zhuzhed it up, if you will. So there's a couple of different things that our effective grid can do on top of the existing editable grid. So first of all, it's fully customizable. So there are some limitations with the out-of-the-box editable grid. There were some, at first you couldn't use lookup fields to do edits. There were a couple other kind of limitations, and so ours is fully customizable to do things like transposing. You can do it in the actual larger view. You can do it with an embedded on a specific record if you want to. So there's a lot of additional customization you can do around our editable grid. It also comes with things like intelligent fields. So if it is a lookup, it can kind of think for you about what and make a suggestion there. There's inline editing, as well as the ability to transpose a grid just like you could in Excel. So there's a couple extra bells and whistles. We kind of zhuzhed up the concept of an editable grid, and using little features like that that make the users have a better experience is going to definitely help you with your user adoption. So next tool, Brad. Okay, perfect. So this is all kind of, we're counting this as one tool. Better UX is better adoption. So we're going to go over 3 tools, but really it's one tip. So the next one is really the hierarchy visualizer. Again, this is an out-of-the-box feature of Dynamics 365. That little hierarchy up in the right-hand corner, a couple buttons over to the X button, that's the hierarchy tool that comes with Dynamics 365. We saw that tool on the roadmap and we thought, you know what, users really want this tool, but let's add a little bit to it. Let's kind of enhance the hierarchy tool to do a couple extra things that it's not offering us right now. Currently, the out-of-the-box hierarchy gives you child-parent relationship, but we recognize that there's probably more expanded versions of entity relationships that you'll want to diagram out. So ours is much more close to a Visio diagram capability of relationship rather than just the parent-child relationships that you get with Dynamics 365. So that's really kind of a one-to-one. Ours kind of allows you to do more visualizations with the relationships of records, as it's not just dependent on that parent-child lookup. Also, we can do things like add roll-ups, we can do summaries, we can do folders within folders if you have categories of hierarchy. There's a lot of extra little nuances that we saw the out-of-the-box tool and thought that's great. A lot of our clients are looking to kind of organize their clients and how their clients relate to maybe other clients or subcategories of clients. But let's go ahead and add a little bit more to it. Let's extend it a little bit more, since we know hierarchy is a great visualization tool, and let's add to it. So that is our upgraded hierarchy version on top of the D365 tool. And then last but not least, I think that's the last tool we're going through, is the effective tiles. So this is really, the idea really came from, if you look at the middle, typically the middle of any CRM record, you've got kind of that interactions area. It kind of tells you all of your activities, all of your wall feed information, all of your, you can look at your emails, your tasks, your appointments. Your OneNote is kind of embedded in that same tabular area. It's a really highly used area of a form because it tabs out a bunch of different types of records that are very pertinent to the user looking at the form. Well, we kind of took that idea and said, well, why not let users create their own little tabbed out versions of different records that they want to see. So you can kind of see in these pictures, the look and feel is very similar to what we call the interactions pane. It's very similar to having a tab of activities, having a tab of wall feed, having a tab of OneNote, having a tab of notes, same tabular concept there, but we're letting you add any entity you want. So we can have, this looks like it's the board of directors, which would be all contacts. Then we can have a tab for deals. In that bottom right picture, we're looking at a tab of the internal team, external team, and participants. So we're really taking the same visual concept that Microsoft has confirmed with all of the UI experts that they have, that is a feature that people want, and we are enhancing that by expanding it to any custom entity and any out-of-the-box entity to visualize in a nice, clean, tabular format that we call effective tiles. So again, very similar concepts to the really great work Microsoft is already doing from a UX perspective, and we just kind of tweak it a little bit or take that idea and change it a little bit to really enhance the user's experience. So let's talk about getting smarter with using mapping tools. So there's an out-of-the-box Bing Map. Obviously, that is a tool that that a lot of people use to do simple things like, find a client, use the directions, and then go on site. Right? That's a pretty easy, straightforward use case. But what if you wanted to go ahead and enhance market segmentation by having maps that don't necessarily line up with a traditional within 10 miles or with a traditional traditional, from 10 miles or from 15 miles from a specific point location. So really polygon shapes, or shapes that more align closer to how you might actually have your territories done. So are you going within, I'm in charge of these 4 counties in Louisiana where I'm from, it's parishes. So these are my 5 parishes. Those shapes don't exactly line up within a certain radius, which is the typical way that you would kind of designate an area within a tool like a Bing Maps. So what a geomation solution does is it lets you take things like a polygon shape or an unusual shape and map that out so that you can have different types of true segmentation that probably matches your actual territory assignment that you're already using a lot more closely than a radius mapping assignment would. So we really feel like our using a geomation tool and using and layering in a map that is beyond the Bing Maps is really going to help users get the type of information for segmentation for marketing, as well as segmentation for sales. It's going to be more effective than the traditional out-of-the-box kind of mapping capabilities. And you can read all of the technical new features that we have under the new feature section there. Obviously, it's enabled for Azure to use this as a web app like we've got on that right-hand side. But segmentation, more expanded segmentation capabilities is really where it's at for the mapping tool. So complex business rules and not having to manage those either in Excel spreadsheets or in multiple different type of C drives on people's desktops, things like that. So what we've done, and this was really done for a health plan that if you look at, and we've used it for broader things as well, but if you look at CRM and what the workflow tool can do, again, with that same theme of let's take what Microsoft has and kind of tweak it a little bit. The workflow tool is very powerful. It's got and/or logic. You can do parent-child workflows, but it does fall short on a couple different areas that make it a little bit harder to have things like a workflow library where you can tag a workflow with a label and then search for that label and all the workflows that are associated with that label. It doesn't let you define specific variables that you can use repeatedly over and over again. So the workflow tool is really great, but there are some areas that we've again enhanced it using the tool that we call the rules engine. We originally built it for a health plan because a health plan is basically a collection of rules. If you live in this state, if you were of this age, if you have this health history, if you want to take the gold, silver, or platinum plan, then this is going to be the benefits, and this is going to be the deductible, and this is going to be the copay, and this is going to be the amount. It's just a massive collection of rules. So what we built this for in the inception of it was really to build out health plans and configure those products. But the application of this tool is much broader than that. It basically takes the workflow engine, injects it with some steroids to let you do some additional capabilities that the workflow doesn't have, and the variables, the tagging to be able to search through rules, obviously the same type of logic and/or logic, and different things like that that are going to be really helpful. I'll show you in the second picture. Although we don't have it expanded, the business rules inside of CRM that come out of the box are really letting you write client-side scripting. So the show hide logic, it really actually writes the show hide JScript, and then it's actually client-side, and that's what's going on behind the scenes. Our rules engine does the exact same thing. So that conditions preview and actions preview, if those tabs were expanded, those are actually, as you're kind of clicking on your little rules, just like you would in a workflow tool or business rules out of the box, it's going to actually start writing the client-side scripting that you need, and then you package up that code and you can import it into your solution. But this is truly a business user tool. This is not an IT tool, although they can use it as well. So you can now take any type of workflow or rules you need written, hand it over to the business users, and really let them dictate what those rules should be by not having to have IT write the code. And then IT can actually proof the code by looking at the conditions and actions preview to see if it's going to break anything downstream. So really great tool to put in the end users' hands to help them kind of dictate any different additional workflow or rules capabilities that they need. So expand the reach with D365 Powerups. So Powerups is a fairly new concept for Microsoft that is really taking off, as it allows users to have an app-like experience really for anything that you want. So for example, if you've got a group of sales users and they really do, they really do 5 things. They do quoting, they do opportunity management, they do account management, maybe they make sales calls, and maybe they do contract management, just 5 set specific things. Rather than having them experience Dynamics all up and kind of dig through or go to those 5 areas that they actually are working in, you can have a Power App for each one of those workflows. And only the 5 items or the 10 steps or whatever the controlled areas of CRM they need to experience, and that includes automating, automating emails if they send the quote out, automating an email to follow up with the client, 2 days later. If you receive, a question back about the quote, to automate a response that says, let me review this and get back to you. Any type of automation you want to add into those different areas, but really to take the user's experience, silo it down into just the things that they're doing and give them their own app experience for each one of those things is a great way to reduce the visual overhead that comes with a powerful tool like a CRM, where you can kind of see the whole world, but I'm only using 5 pieces of it. So don't show me all 50 pieces, just show me the 5 pieces that I really need. So we really highly recommend you guys getting into Power Apps, finding and identifying the specific use cases that CRM users are actually using, and create a Power App for it. Microsoft is touting this as a app creator that anybody can use. I would say it's probably a subject matter expert, a business analyst type of person would probably be best to create these apps. I wouldn't suggest actually handing it to your Salesforce and letting them create their own apps, but definitely working with them to identify, working with your end users to identify what those use cases are, and then building those apps out would be a great way to get them using the system more easily. And this was, I got to pick which tip I wanted to do for this one. And this is probably one of the oldest tips in the book for user adoption, but it's still good. This feature has been around since 2011, and it is the email a link feature that comes with Dynamics CRM. So this has been around for, 8 or 9 years as the product has been developed. And basically, any view that you look at, there is a little button at the top of that that says email a link. What that will then do is generate an email that will have the hyperlink to that record as well as the name of that record. It'll launch Outlook off of your desktop or whatever mail client you're using as your default, and then you can email this to anyone in your organization. So if you, this is a really easy tool to teach someone how to use. It can be used for training, it can be used for questions to IT, but whoever receives that email now has a direct link to the exact view or the exact record that I'm confused about. So I don't have to kind of hunt and peck or do a screen share to be like, what are you looking at? What do you need help with? It's a great tool, and also it honors security rights and privileges. So if you fat thumb on your mobile device, you email a link out to a client and it's actually their record or something like that, if they don't have CRM privileges, they can't open it. So you don't have to worry about accidentally emailing a link out to the wrong person. But this is a great quick tip. You can teach all of your users how to do this. This is an IT lifesaver, as they get much more accurate information on what's really wrong, and they can go right to that specific record that that particular user is having questions about.
All right, thanks, Leah. Next up, John Walsh is going to take us through the last handful of tips and tools and techniques.
Hey everybody, I'm John Walsh. I'm the product manager for capital markets and banking, as well as our D365 tools. I'm going to go through a few of those tools and tell you how they can help you. The first one is Stake. Stake is a new product for us. It's based off of mature IP though from Hitachi. It's originally developed by for the five Japanese mega banks as their security backbone. The key components for Stake are military grade encryption. It's FIPS compliant encryption, 256-bit encryption that cannot be broken. And we also use zero knowledge technology. that basically means that we hold the key, but we don't have access to the data itself. Additionally, it has auditable user and data logs. So first, to kind of step back, some of the limitations with Dynamics 365 is that there is audit logging in D365, but it does not log read operations unless changes were made to the data, does not log access to any documents associated with the record, and auditing can be turned off by the system administrator. This presents a huge hole when you consider any financial regulations of transparency, or even Sarbanes-Oxley of It Takes Two, where a system administrator in this case is God and can, if we were to take an example, let's say in private equity, and turn off audit logging, system administrator then assigns himself or herself to the deal team to see that Apple is looking to buy Amazon, then unassigns himself in the deal team, turns back on the audit logging, and then goes and makes some trades and then submits his 2 weeks notice. This type of thing could be happening every day and we would not know about it. However, with Stake, now we're able to track anything that happens within the system by anybody. So if you've done it, we're able to trace that, and it cannot be turned off, and it's managed by the compliance department, not by the system administrator himself or herself. Next up, I want to talk about My Contracts. My Contracts is also some new IP for us that was developed out of a customer engagement, but it is a contract management light solution. And the reason that I'm using the terminology light is that we don't have the full templating and revisioning of more robust contract management solutions, but we do have a very robust solution here nonetheless. We're able to manage and track. So we're able to process contracts and RFPs, the contract amendments, the assignments, the renewals, and all the workflows that are associated with those, as well as the terminations. Make sure that we're not dropping the ball at any given time and we're maintaining compliance with our contracts. The last thing that I want to talk to you about is activity notes. Activity notes was born from capital markets, but we're finding that it has broader appeal outside of capital markets. If you have a meeting, rarely are you just talking about one subject, and yet notes in D365 assumes that you only talk about one thing. However, if you talk about multiple things, you need to have the opportunity or the ability to have multiple regardings to associate with a given activity or a call or meeting. So activity notes allows you to do that. Jumping around here a little bit. We've got it also where it's configured or configurable, where you can associate whatever type of entities that you want to be able to associate with that record. You can do that also through a back-end user interface. We've developed several back-end user interfaces to allow our tools to be easily configured by the end users. And so in this case, we've got the users here and the accounts and contacts, but we could also be associating products or any other type of entity that we want to easily configure through that back-end UI, and then report on that. So using connections, we're able to easily report on what connections were made over what activities. Last thing I want to talk to you about is some of our tools, our essential tools that really it separates us from the rest in that we have some deep knowledge and experience with over 1,000 implementations out there, and through those we've developed some tools to help you get further faster. The plugin library is one of those that is a library of multiple tools that prevents us from having to recreate the wheel every time. Calculated fields, an example, that is something that is not out of the box, and yet if we were having to recreate that every time, then you'd have to pay for that every time. However, we're able to pull from our toolbox and use these tools in every engagement to help our customers get further faster. The same thing goes for the JavaScript library, providing over 100 client-side scripts that can handle everything from simple user interface enhancements to sophisticated data. These are all tools that are available to you as our base solution of D365 tools known as the Essential tools. For any more information on any of these tools, I ask you please contact me. I think that our contact information will be provided at the end of this call, but please don't hesitate to contact me if you have any questions or want some more information. Brad, back to you.
Thanks, John, and thanks to all of our panelists. Wanted to open this up for questions, since we have time. You can either, I believe, Hannah, I think you can type into the chat window from GoToWebinar if you do have any questions. And if not, you could certainly send us a question. Hannah, I believe you are going to be sending out an email with some further information about these tips and tools, as well as contact information about the different items.
Yep, we'll send out a copy of the recording of today's presentation with some additional info on the tricks and tips that were offered today, and we'll include how to get in touch with us if anyone has any follow-up questions.
Well, with no questions, I want to thank our panelists again, and also thanks to the viewers out there for checking it out, and look forward to talking to you soon. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Bye-bye.